Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the nuts and bolts of the Oberheim OB-X8.
Yeah, this is a cool one. An 8-voice polyphonic analog synth.
Exactly. And it's all about capturing those classic Oberheim sounds.
Yeah.
You know, the OB-X8, AB8, even nods to the SX.
And what jumps out right away is that front panel. So immediate. Feels built for performing, for tweaking.
Totally. So for this deep dive, we've got the official user manual and, crucially, the OS 2.0 Addendum 2.
Right. And the mission today isn't just to read out a feature list, is it?
No way. We want to figure out how this thing actually works for making music. How do the features help with sound design, with playing live?
Looking at the core stuff, but also some of those deeper features.
Okay, so let's kick things off. You get this synth. Where do you start?
Yeah.
Getting it hooked up. The manual points us to the back panel first.
Makes sense. You've got your power input, obviously.
Then USB. This looks pretty useful bidirectional MIDI.
Yeah, MIDI in and out over USB. And it's class compliant, meaning you just plug it into your Mac or PC, and it should just work. No special drivers needed, usually. The computer already knows what to do.
Convenient. Now, the manual mentions something about not using the regular MIDI import and the USB MIDI at the same time.
Yeah, a bit of a warning there. Says it could cause confusion, like conflicting MIDI messages. Might get unpredictable.
Okay, good to know.
But it does say MIDI out and USB can send out the same MIDI data simultaneously. No problem there.
Right. So for connecting other gear, you still got your standard MIDI in, out, and through ports. DN connectors.
Yep. And then pedal input sustain, obviously.
Essential for those big pads.
And separate jacks for volume and filter expression pedals. That's nice for real-time shaping.
Definitely. And audio outs.
Stereo pair, left and right on 1/4-inch jacks, also dedicated mono out.
Handy if you're running into a single channel on a mixer amp.
Exactly. And a headphone jack, too.
Yeah.
Shares the master volume control, which is practical.
So connection's made. Power on. What's next? Getting sound.
Well, yeah, connect your audio outputs to your mixer or interface. If you've got the module version, connect your MIDI keyboard controller first.
Okay.
But a really key first step the manual highlights is calibration. Running the internal tune for the oscillators and filters.
Like tuning up. Because it's analog.
Precisely. Especially when it's new or just arrived. Let it warm up, settle in. The manual suggests doing it a few times over the first couple of days.
Makes sense. Components need to acclimatize.
And it also says, you know, if the temperature changes drastically later on, moving it between rooms, maybe, run the calibration again, just to keep everything tight.
Good advice. Okay, so it's calibrated. How does it organize its sounds? Presets.
It uses banks, and this is where the heritage really shows. You've got banks specifically designed to sound like the OB-X, the OB-X8 or OB-8.
Oh, cool. So they capture the character?
Yeah, different filter types, different envelope responses, supposedly modeled on the originals, plus a dedicated OB-X8 bank for its own sounds.
And you navigate these hows.
With the bank and group encoders on the front panel, you'll see these group labels too, A, B, C, D.
A throwback.
Yeah, straight from the old OB series. Doesn't really change how you use it now, but it's a nice nod to the past. Could help if you're looking for a specific vintage sound, maybe.
So you dial in bank, then group.
And then hit one of the program switches, 1 through 8, to select the actual sound. Pretty straightforward.
And once a program's loaded, you could just start tweaking knobs.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of it. Almost everything is right there on the panel. Immediate editing.
Nice. And there's a way to compare your tweaked sound to the original preset.
Yep, that global switch.
Yep.
Press it, and you toggle between your edited version and the saved version. Super useful for hearing exactly what you've changed.
Like an A-B comparison. I like that. What if you want to ignore the preset entirely and just build from scratch based on the knob positions?
That's manual mode. Hit the manual button.
And then?
The sound instantly changes to reflect exactly where all the knobs and switches are set physically. It ignores the stored preset data.
So it's what you see is what you get.
Exactly. Brilliant for learning the synth, understanding how each control affects the sound, or just for pure experimentation.
How do you get back to preset mode?
Just hit the manual button again, or select any program switch. It snaps back to the stored sound.
Okay. And if you want a really blank slate, a starting point.
There's a basic program. You hold down the manual button and press right.
And that gives you
a very simple sound, usually just one oscillator active basic settings, a clean canvas.
Good starting point.
And an interesting quirk. If you're already in manual mode when you recall the basic program, the physical knobs stay where they are, but the switches and all those page 2 settings reset to their basic defaults.
Okay. So you made a sound you love. How do you save it?
Hit the right button. It'll start blinking.
Then choose where you want it to go.
Yep. Use the bank, group, and program switches to select the slot, then press right again to confirm.
Can you overwrite existing sounds?
You sure can. The manual actually gives some good advice here. Maybe save incrementally as you work on a sound. Like save version 1, tweak it, save version 2.
So you can backtrack if needed. Smart.
Yeah. And if you hit right and then change your mind, just press right again to cancel the save.
Okay, fundamentals down. Let's get into the controls themselves, starting with global settings.
Right. Accessed via the global switch. You use the bank scroll encoder to pick the setting.
And the group value encoder to change its value. Got it. What's in here?
A lot, actually. Master tune course and fine adjustments for the overall pitch.
Good stuff.
Then local control. This is important for MIDI setups.
So.
It lets you disconnect the OB-X8's keyboard or controls from its internal sound engine, so you can use it as just a controller, or play its sounds from a sequencer without creating MIDI loops. You can turn off keys, levers, or both.
Prevents those nasty feedback loops.
Yeah.
Useful.
Definitely. Then sustain pedal mode. You can have it work like the old OB-8 where it triggers a specific pedal release time you set elsewhere. Or a more modern note-on mode where it just holds notes like a piano sustain pedal as long as you press it.
Flexibility there. What else?
Pedal polarity for the expression pedals. Make sure they work the right way around depending on the pedal brand.
Good. Stereo mono output modes.
Yep. Stereo, forced mono, or an auto mode that detects what's plugged in. The mono jack is always active, though, even in stereo mode, but panning might affect its level.
Pitch lever direction, you can reverse that if you prefer.
Yeah, some players like that. Then MIDI parameter send-receive. This is interesting.
CC or NRPN?
Exactly. You can choose off, CC, or NRPN. The manual strongly recommends NRPN.
Why is that?
Much higher resolution. NRPNs can handle the full range of parameters with finer steps than the 128 steps of standard CCs. Gets you closer to the analog feel via MIDI.
Makes sense for detailed control.
You can also globally enable or disable if the OB-X8 responds to any MIDI controller messages at all. And control how it handles MIDI program changes off, transmit only, receive only, or both.
Full control there. What about SysX?
The MIDI SysX cable setting lets you choose whether SysX data like patch dumps, alternate tunings, OS updates goes via the MIDI DIN ports or the USB port.
Crucial for backups and sharing.
Totally. There's also a screensaver for the display, that quirky load from cassette option using the ARP input, maybe for loading old patches.
Wow, retro.
A quick way to recall the basic program from the menu and a reset globals function.
The panic button if things get weird.
Kind of, yeah. Resets all global settings to default. Good for troubleshooting. Oh, and you check your OS version here too, top right of the display.
All right, let's move to the sound generators, oscillators.
The core building blocks, 2 per voice, analog.
Waveforms.
Sawtooth, pulse, and triangle, classic analog shapes.
No square wave listed there.
Well, the pulse wave is a square wave when the pulse width is at 50%, but interestingly, page 2 lets you adjust the square wave's character its level, basically to match either the OB-X8 or the OB-8. Little subtle differences.
Ah, nice touch. And pulse width modulation.
Yep, you've got the pulse width knob right there, affects both oscillators' pulse waves, and you can modulate that width, typically with the LFO, for that classic PWM sound.
Main controls for each oscillator.
Frequency big range, 5 octaves, also affected by master tune. And that pulse width knob we mentioned, controlling the duty cycle from 50% square down to narrow pulses.
Can modulation make it go even narrower?
Yes, modulation can sweep it across the full range from very thin pulse wave through square, almost all the way to silence. Bipolar modulation is possible.
Okay, oscillators covered. Filters next. Shaping the tone.
Big part of the Oberheim sound. The manual suggests a good way to hear them. Start with the basic program, then use the type switch. It cycles through the main filter models. OB-X 2-pole, OB-X8 2-pole, and OB-X8 4-pole. The LEDs show which is active.
2-pole versus 4-pole. That's the steepness of the cutoff slope, right?
Exactly. 2-pole is gentler, 12 dB per octave. 4-pole is steeper, 24 dB per octave, more dramatic.
And how do you really hear what the filter's doing?
Good tip from the manual. Turn on oscillator 2, set it to sawtooth, lots of harmonics, and detune it just a tiny bit using the Osca 2 detune knob.
Ah, it gives the filter more harmonic content to chew on.
Precisely. Then sweep the filter frequency knob, that's the cutoff point.
Right, and resonance.
Emphasizes frequencies right at the cutoff. Gives like that squelchy, peaky sound. But like the originals, these main filter types don't self-oscillate into a pure tone.
No screaming resonance then. What of the modulation knob in the filter section?
That controls how much the filter envelope affects the cutoff frequency. Positive amount only on the front panel. It can also route that same envelope to oscillator 2's pitch if you enable FNV elsewhere.
And the type switch LEDs.
Yep.
Yellow for OBX2 pole.
Yep. Red for OB-X8 2-pole, both LEDs on for the OB-X8 4-pole.
But wait, there's more. SCM filter modes.
Ah, yes. Hidden depths. On page 2, you can select 3 filter types derived from the Oberheim SM module: high pass, band pass, and notch.
Different filtering styles entirely.
Completely. And when one of those SCM modes is active, neither of the front panel LEDs for the type switch will be lit. That's your clue.
Sneaky. And OS 2.0 adds another filter too.
It does. A new 4-pole mode, though the details aren't in this main filter section of the manual. We'll get to that.
Okay. Let's talk modulation. The LFO,
Right.
low frequency oscillator.
Right. Your main source of cyclic modulation vibrato, filter sweeps, PWM.
What waveforms does the front panel LFO offer?
5 choices: sine for smooth wobbles, square for abrupt jumps, sample and hold for random steps.
Standard. And the other two?
Saw up, a rising ramp, you get that by pressing sine and square together, and saw down, falling ramp, by pressing square and sample and hold together.
Combination presses. Clever.
Yeah, pressing with just one button deselects the others, unless you're doing those saw combinations.
And there was something about the square wave behavior, OBX versus OB8 style.
Right. Page 2 has an LFO type setting. It lets you choose if the square wave LFO modulation behaves more like the OBX, mostly negative pitch modulation, or the OB8, positive only, affects VCF modulation too. Subtle but authentic options.
How do you route the LFO?
2 main modulation buses, destination 1 and destination 2. The depth 1 knob controls the overall amount for anything selected in bus 1.
And what can bus 1 modulate?
Oscillator 1 frequency, oscillator 2 frequency, or the filter cutoff, selectable with buttons.
What about bus 2?
The front panel switches for bus 2 let you target PWM1, pulse width OS1, PWM2, pulse width OSCA2, or volume for amplitude modulation tremolo effects.
And the depth for bus 2 is set.
That's one of the many things lurking on page 2, along with like 18 other LFO parameters.
18?
Yeah. Independent attack delay times for modulation pads, LFO triggering options, keyboard tracking for LFO speed, quantized steps, loads of deep stuff inherited from the OB8's page 2 system.
Wow. Okay, that's some serious depth. Master section next. Looks simpler.
Pretty much. Master volume knob also does headphone volume.
Convenient.
And the chord mode button. This ties into a page 2 parameter called chord hold.
How does that work?
Lets you decide if a chord you play using chord mode keeps sounding only while you hold the keys, key only, or if it sustains indefinitely after you release them, infinite.
Got it. Now the control section. Levers and detune.
Yep. Pitch lever usually for bending pitch up down, mod lever typically for vibrato or other modulation effects.
And the OSCA2 detune knob?
Right. Small offsets, positive or negative, for oscillator 2 relative to oscillator 1. Fattens up the sound. The little LED next to it lights up when detune is active.
How much can it detune?
Half the range of the main master tune control, apparently.
Okay, now the lever box. Looks busy.
This is Performance Central. Mode switch toggles the lever's function between modulation and arpeggiator.
Okay, so the levers do different things depending on that switch.
Exactly. You've also got rate and depth knobs here. Switches to choose if OSC1 or OSC2 or both are affected by mod or bend.
An arpeggiate on-off switch.
Yep. And specific ARP controls. Hold, KBD, keyboard track, down, up modes, and transpose switches.
Let's break down mod lever use first. For vibrato.
Okay. Set the mode switch to mod. Red LED. Use the OSC1, OSC2 switches to choose which oscillator gets the vibrato.
Then rate and depth knobs.
Rate sets the vibrato speed, the LFO speed. Depth sets the initial amount of vibrato. Pushing the mod lever then increases the vibrato amount from that initial setting up to the maximum.
And you can change the vibrato waveform.
Yes, on page 2, you can select the vibrato LFO waveform sine, square, etc. And remember that LFO type setting on page 2. It affects how this whole vibrato LFO system behaves, mimicking either the OB-X8 or OB8 field.
Lots of interaction between controls. Now switch mode to ARP. Yellow LED. What happens?
Rate knob now controls arpeggiator speed. The mod and bend switches also change function, becoming relevant to the arpeggiator.
And the arpeggio switch just turns it on.
Yep. Starts the pattern playing based on the notes you hold. Works regardless of the mode ARP mode switch, actually.
Like other ARP controls. Hold. KBD.
Hold latches the current notes being arpeggiated. KBD makes the arpeggiator follow the notes you're currently pressing. Down upset the direction. Transpose shifts it up or down octaves.
And there are hidden ARP features, too.
Oh yeah, page 2 again, more ARP modes and settings in there.
Which is the perfect segue. Page 2 parameters, chapter 3.
But this sounds like where the real tweaking happens.
Absolutely. Press the page 2 switch.
Yeah.
You unlock a whole other layer of control.
What kind of things are in here? Give me some examples.
Okay. Individual oscillator levels, oscillator pulse widths beyond the main knob, filter keyboard tracking amount, deep envelope shaping parameters.
More LFO stuff.
Loads. Modulation depths for bus 2, LFO delays, LFO sync trigger options, that LFO type we mentioned, also portamento modes and time.
Portamento, a glide between notes.
Right. Unison settings, how many voices stack, how they're detuned, the pedal release time for that OB-8 sustain mode, stereo panning per voice,
Wow.
the vibrato LFO waveform selection, bend lever amount, how far the pitch lever bends, and crucially, velocity and aftertouch routing.
Ah, making it responsive to how you play.
Exactly. You can assign velocity or aftertouch, key pressure, to control things like volume, filter cutoff, LFO depth, pitch, lots of expressive potential.
So page 2 lets you really customize the core behavior, like OS12 levels for balancing the raw tone.
Precisely. Or voice detune range to control how wide the unison sounds. Unison voices sets how many voices stack up. Unison key mode affects how those voices trigger.
Pedal release time fine-tunes that specific sustained behavior.
Yep. LFO type sets the overall LFO character and affects other LFO page 2 settings. Vibrato LFO wave gives you different vibrato textures.
Mod 1 delay time adds a delay before modulation kicks in.
You got it. Portamento modes offer different glide styles. Chord hold mode configures that chord button behavior. Bend lever amount limits the pitch bend range.
And the velocity aftertouch stuff lets you map playing dynamics to sound parameters. It's like a synth programming toolkit under the surface.
That's a good way to put it. It takes the front panel immediacy and adds this huge layer of optional depth. Chapter 4, they get some examples, right? Synth bass, synth brass.
Yeah, basic recipes to show how oscillators, filter, and envelopes work together. Just starting points.
The advice is start simple, add complexity, save versions.
Pretty much standard sound design wisdom. Don't get lost too quickly, save your progress.
Okay, now let's jump to the OS 2.0 addendum. Big new features here. How do you check your version again?
Press Global. Look at the top right of the display. If it says 2.0 or higher, you've got these features.
First up, split plus and double plus modes by timbral.
Yes, meaning two different sounds at once. Split plus puts one sound on the lower half of the keyboard, another on the upper half.
Like splitting a piano for bass and melody.
Exactly. And in split plus mode, the lower and upper sounds can even be on separate MIDI channels. Very useful for sequencing.
What about double plus, Ann?
That layers two sounds across the whole keyboard, both responding to the same MIDI channel. And it adds a special binaural panning mode for these layers, wider stereo image.
Sounds interesting. Polychain mode.
This lets you link multiple OB-X8s together for more voices.
Seriously, how many?
Up to 4 units, keyboards or modules connected via MIDI DIN cables, so potentially 32 voices of Oberheim.
Whoa. How does that work?
One unit is the master. It sends all the note and control data to the others, which act as slaves. You set this up in the global MIDI output settings.
Does the master control everything? Tuning.
Yep. The tune function on the master unit triggers calibration across all connected units, keeps them all playing nicely together.
Very cool for huge sounds. MPE support in OS 2.0 as well.
Yes, MIDI polyphonic expression. Adds per note expressive control if you have an MPE controller.
How is it implemented?
Y-axis movement, typically MIDI CC#74, can be assigned on page 2 to control OSCA2 pitch, filter cutoff, or both per note.
And Z-axis pressure.
That's channel pressure.
Yeah.
Can polyphonically control the filter and any destinations assigned to aftertouch via the Tosiak button. More nuance per finger.
Nice. Arpeggiator clock sync. Finally!
Big one. You can now sync the ARP to external MIDI clock from a DAR, drum machine, whatever, via MIDI DIN or USB.
So it follows tempo automatically.
Right. And the rate knob then selects clock divisions, quarter notes, eighths, sixteenths, etc., instead of just speed values. It even responds to MIDI song position pointer.
Keeps it locked in time with your track.
Yeah.
Any other OS 2.0 tweaks?
One more modulation destination added, LFO1 Mod 2. The second LFO bus, can now target volume on page 2. More options for rhythmic modulation.
Okay, the appendices seem useful too. Appendix B calibration.
Yeah, detailed instructions for manually calibrating the VCOs, filters, and levers if needed. Also reminds you how to do the global parameter reset.
Good reference. Appendix C, sysx.
Walks you through exporting and importing sounds, single programs, or whole banks using system-exclusive data.
For backups or sharing patches online.
Exactly. Mentions using software like sysx Librarian or MIDI-aux, and explains the send-receive commands in the OB-X8's global menu, USB or MIDI DIN for transfer.
Appendix E sounds fascinating, though. Alternative tunings.
Oh yeah, this is wild. The OB-X8 comes loaded with 64 alternative scales beyond standard 12-tone equal temperament.
64? Like what?
All sorts. Just intonation systems aiming for pure intervals, harmonic series tunings, microtonal stuff like Wendy Carlos's alpha beta gamma scales,
Yeah.
historical temperaments, scales from Indian, Balinese, Javanese, Chinese music, even things like bagpipe tuning or Terry Riley's Harp of New Albion scale.
That's incredible. So you
Yeah.
can play music that physically sounds different, harmonically.
Totally. Opens up completely different melodic and harmonic possibilities, a huge creative avenue, and you can import your own custom tunings via sysx too.
Mind blown. Okay, and finally, there's a detailed MIDI implementation chart.
Yep. Everything the OB-X8 transmits and receives via MIDI. Note messages, CCs, NRPNs, sysx tables listing every parameter, its corresponding CC or NRPN number, and its value range. Essential for deep MIDI integration.
So wrapping this all up, the OB-X8 really feels like a bridge, doesn't it?
Definitely. Authentic vintage analog sound, that immediate hands-on control.
But then layered with all this modern depth. The page 2 stuff, the OS 2.0, features like bitemporality, polychaining, MPE, MIDI sync.
And those alternative tunings, it's not just a recreation, it's an evolution.
It really puts a massive sonic palette at your fingertips, from classic pads and basses to potentially really experimental territory.
We hope this deep dive has given everyone listening a good handle on what makes it tick, beyond just the specs, a shortcut to understanding its potential.
Without getting totally lost in the weeds, hopefully.
Yeah. And maybe think about how that blend, the classic warmth and the modern features, could push your own music somewhere new.
Especially playing with things like the deep modulation possibilities, or venturing into those non-standard tunings. What kind of sounds might emerge?
Definitely worth exploring the manual further, but more importantly, getting hands-on if you can. That's where the real discoveries happen.